The Fort Wayne Police Department is asking for the public's help tonight. If you live on or near Arlington Avenue in Fort Wayne's North Side neighborhood, and if you saw or heard anything unusual on the afternoon of October 4th, 1995, please call the tip line. A 37-year-old mother has been found dead in her home. Her name is Ruth Ann Morales. Her family is asking for your help. The calls come in that evening. The woman who walked her dog passed the house at 6 o'clock and noticed nothing unusual. The man at the end of the block who had been home sick and had watched most of the afternoon from his living room window. The teenager who cut through the alley behind the house on her way home from school, the way she did every day, and who had seen nothing, heard nothing, noticed nothing. No one calls about the mail truck that was parked at the far end of the block the previous afternoon. No one thinks to mention the former mail carrier, the one who had worked this route for 6 years, who had been transferred to a different route 2 months ago, who had no official reason to be on Arlington Avenue anymore. Because the mailman is part of the neighborhood. The mailman is the backdrop. You don't think of the backdrop as the danger. This is October 4th, 1995. The entire country had spent the previous afternoon watching the O.J. Simpson verdict. The news was still full of it. And in Fort Wayne, Indiana, while all of that was happening, a 14-year-old boy named Marcus came home from school and found his mother, and called 911, and stayed on the line for 11 minutes until the officers arrived. He was 14. The person who answered that call, a dispatcher named Carol Owens, who had worked the Fort Wayne 911 Center for 8 years, said she had never heard anyone go so still so quickly on the line. A boy who started the call with one voice and finished it with a different one. To understand what was taken from him, and from his sister, and from a neighborhood that had trusted without thinking about it, we have to go back to Fort Wayne in the autumn of 1995. Because to understand what was lost when Ruth Ann Morales didn't come home, you first have to understand who Ruth Ann Morales was. Fort Wayne is the second largest city in Indiana, built by manufacturing along the confluence of 3 rivers. A city that had spent the 1980s managing the gradual withdrawal of some of its industrial base with the particular steadiness of Midwestern communities that do not collapse into what they are losing, but reorganize around what they have left. The North Side neighborhood was the residential grid of elm trees and brick ranch houses that post-war America assembled by the acre, and that had aged, by 1995, into something that felt lived in and settled. Neighbors who had been on the same block for 20 years, a school 4 blocks away, a hardware store cooperative called Heartland Hardware on Coliseum Boulevard, where Ruth Ann Morales had kept the books for 7 years. Ruth Ann was 37 years old. She had moved to Fort Wayne from Hammond, in northwestern Indiana, 8 years earlier, with 2 very young children and a plan she had drawn up on the kitchen table of an apartment she could barely afford. The plan was specific: bookkeeping work to start, accounting certification by the time her children were in high school, her own small practice eventually. She had been executing the plan in order since 1987. Her children, Sophia, then 8, now 16, and Marcus, then 6, now 14, had grown up on Arlington Avenue. They had walked to the elementary school and then the middle school. They had known their neighbors by name. Ruth Ann had built something in those 8 years that was solid in the way that things built with discipline and intention are solid. She was a bookkeeper. She was a night student at Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne, 2 semesters away from her CPA license. She had passed her first certification examination in the spring of 1995 and had told her children over dinner that same night, keeping her voice even because she did not want to make too large a thing of something she had expected to accomplish. But Marcus had noticed that she used the good plates. And she kept a household budget ledger, a spiral notebook, organized like an accounting journal, in which every income and expense was recorded in colored ink. Blue for income, red for expenses, green for savings. She had been keeping this ledger since she was 26 and on her own for the first time, and she had not missed a day in 11 years. Her children knew the system without being told. They knew that the green column meant things were getting better, and that the green column had been growing steadily since the spring, since the raise that came with the passing grade, since the decision she had made in February to save 11 months' worth of the difference. She had been saving for a larger apartment, one with enough bedrooms that she and her children each had their own room. She had done the math. She was 11 months away. The ledger was on the kitchen table, open to the morning entry, when Marcus came home from school on October 4th, 1995. The last entry was from that morning. The green column was growing. She did not come home to close it. Ruth Ann's supervisor at Heartland Hardware, a man named Dale Fitch, watched her leave the employee lot at 5:15 p.m. On October 4th, 1995, she had mentioned earlier in the day that Marcus had soccer tryouts at 4 o'clock. She should have been home well before 5. At 3:30, Marcus came home. Tryouts had been canceled, a notice he had missed. His mother's car was in the driveway. The front door was unlocked. He goes inside. He picks up the phone. He calls 911 at 3:36 p.m. He stays on the line for 11 minutes, until the first officers come up the front walk, and Carol Owens on the other end of the line says, "They're there. I'm going to let you go now." He says, "Okay," and hangs up. Fort Wayne PD was at the house by 3:45. Indiana State Police evidence response arrived by 5 p.m. The household budget ledger was on the kitchen table. Its last entry was from that morning. Investigators canvassed Arlington Avenue that evening and through the following days. 2 details were logged and not fully connected. The first came from a neighbor named Patricia Flynn, 2 houses south, who told investigators that on the afternoon of October 3rd, the day before the murder, she had noticed a mail truck parked at the far end of the block at approximately 4:45 p.m. She had assumed it was the carrier finishing the route late. She had not noticed the driver. She did not know the truck's number. The detail was entered in the supplemental reports. The second came 4 days later in the secondary canvass. Edna Garza, 66, who had lived on Arlington Avenue for 22 years, mentioned that the regular mail carrier, not the current one, the previous one, the one she had known by his first name for 6 years, had been seen on the block on a recent Saturday morning when no mail was delivered. She had waved at him. He had waved back. She had thought nothing of it. His name, she said, was Derek. The lead investigator was Fort Wayne Police Department Detective Susan Harmon, 41 years old, 12 years on the job, experienced and methodical. The kind of detective who ran her canvases wide and her interview notes long, and who followed threads even when they seemed unlikely to produce anything. She spent 2 years on the Morales case, and came away with no viable suspect. Her early investigation focused on 3 individuals. The first was Ruth Ann's former husband, who had relocated to Hammond and who had an acrimonious custody history with her. His employer and 2 coworkers confirmed he had been in meetings in Hammond until 6 p.m. on October 4th, 3 hours from Fort Wayne. He was eliminated. The second was a former Heartland Hardware employee whose termination in September 1995 had involved documentation prepared by Ruth Ann as part of the bookkeeping record. Documentation that had made his case for appeal more difficult. He had made pointed remarks about the company in the weeks after his firing. His movements on October 4th were confirmed by a medical appointment at a downtown Fort Wayne clinic, time-stamped by the appointment record, and confirmed by the front desk staff. He was eliminated. The third was a neighbor who had a property dispute with Ruth Ann from the previous year. He was cooperative, provided a full account of his day, and was confirmed by 2 independent sources. He was eliminated. Harmon also noted Edna Garza's reference to Derek, the previous mail carrier. She contacted the Allen County Postal Supervisor and asked about the mail carrier assigned to the Arlington Avenue route. The supervisor provided information about the current carrier, the man who had taken over the route in August 1995. He was interviewed and cleared. The question Harmon asked was about who was assigned to the route. She did not know to ask about previous carriers, about complaints filed about previous carriers, about what had caused a carrier to be moved. The answer she received was accurate. It was also, in the way that accurate answers can be, incomplete in the way that would matter most. In July 1995, Ruth Ann Morales had filed a 3-page written complaint with the Allen County Postal Supervisor about a carrier named Derek Shields. She had described a pattern of behavior she found frightening. Arrivals at her door with packages that did not require a signature, using them as pretexts for conversation. Comments about her schedule, her children's activities, things she had never told him. A remark about her appearance that had made her feel she needed to lock the door after he left. She had asked for his removal from her route. The postal supervisor had conducted an internal review and had transferred Shields to a different route in August 1995. The complaint was filed internally as resolved. It had not been provided to the Fort Wayne Police Department. It was not provided to the Fort Wayne Police Department after the murder. When Harmon called to ask about the mail carrier on the route, the conversation did not surface a 3-month-old complaint about the previous one. Shields had worked the Arlington Avenue route as a substitute carrier on 2 days in August and once in September. Legitimate access, properly logged after his official transfer. He had been seen on the block on a Saturday by a woman who had known him for 6 years and who waved at him the way she always had. He had been seen in a mail truck on the block the afternoon before Ruth Ann was murdered. None of this was connected in 1995. While Harmon worked the case, Gloria Reyes, Ruth Ann's younger sister, 26 years old, recently started at a new job, drove to Fort Wayne, and did not go back for 3 months. She took her niece and nephew home when she left. She attended every meeting with Harmon, called the tip line, sent the letters, kept the folder organized the way Ruth Ann had kept the ledger organized. She had not been asked whether she was prepared for this. Nobody had asked. By 1997, Detective Harmon had filed her final active case summary and noted the unresolved question of the previous mail carrier's identity. She had submitted a formal request to the Postal Service for a full list of carriers who had worked the Arlington Avenue route since 1989. The list contained 11 names. One of them was Derek Shields, with dates of service from 1989 to August 1995, followed by the notation route reassignment. Harmon located Shields in Indianapolis through a Postal Service forwarding address and conducted a brief phone interview. He was calm. He was cooperative. He said the route reassignment had been due to a restructuring and that he had not been on Arlington Avenue since August. He was logged as interviewed, no basis for further investigation. In 1997, Shields moved from Indianapolis to Cincinnati. He did not notify Fort Wayne PD of the change. By 2000, Sophia Morales had completed her degree in Fort Wayne and moved to Indianapolis. Marcus followed in 2003. Gloria stayed in Indianapolis, where she had built her own life. And she and Marcus and Sophia had arranged their lives so that no one was more than 40 minutes from anyone else on a bad day. Marcus worked in housing advocacy. He dealt, professionally, with systems that failed the people they were supposed to protect. He had a particular capacity for patience with the families he worked with, and he had not had to think very hard about where that patience had come from. He called Gloria every October 4th. She always answered. The budget ledger was in Gloria's possession, in the box with the other papers, in whatever apartment she had lived in since 1995. She had moved it 4 times. She had never opened it. She had never thrown it away. Every case on this channel represents weeks of research, verifying facts and piecing together lives that deserved far better. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, take a second to like and subscribe. Drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get back to Ruth Ann. Then, in 2022, the Indiana State Police announced a partnership with the Allen County Prosecutor's Office to apply forensic genealogy technology to cold homicides from 1990 to 2005, where biological evidence had been properly preserved. The Morales case was among the first 20 files reviewed. The Indiana State Police Laboratory confirmed that the biological evidence collected in October 1995 was in excellent condition after nearly 3 decades of proper refrigerated storage. Indiana State Police Cold Case Unit Agent Thomas Reardon was 44 years old and had worked cold cases for 6 years when the Morales file was assigned to him in late 2022. He read Susan Harmon's original investigation twice. He found the postal route list with 11 names. He found the 1997 phone interview with Shields. He found Patricia Flynn's mail truck sighting on October 3rd and Edna Garza's Saturday sighting of a carrier who no longer had a reason to be on the block. Then he subpoenaed the Allen County Postal Supervisor's complete internal records for the Arlington Avenue route for all of 1995. In those records, he found it, Ruth Ann Morales' written complaint, dated July 14, 1995. 3 pages. He read it twice. She had described what she was experiencing clearly, specifically, and without exaggeration, the way a bookkeeper describes a discrepancy. Here is what I observed. Here are the dates. Here is what it made me feel. Here is what I am asking you to do about it. The internal notation on the complaint read, matter resolved. Carrier reassigned. The complaint had never left the Postal Supervisor's office. In March 2023, the biological evidence from the Morales case was submitted to a forensic genealogy laboratory in Raleigh, North Carolina. The process, explained plainly, uploads crime scene DNA to the public ancestry databases that millions of people use to research their family histories, then traces the genetic matches backward, cousin by cousin, generation by generation, until every branch resolves to a single unknown contributor. The results arrived in May 2023. The match resolved to Hamilton County, Ohio, Cincinnati. Reardon built the family tree in 3 days. The branches were straightforward. Every path led to the same name, Derek Shields. 63 years old. Cincinnati, Ohio, he ran the address history. Fort Wayne, Indiana, 1986 to 1997. Indianapolis, 1997 to 2001. Cincinnati, 2001 to present. He called Gloria Reyes first. She answered on the second ring. When he told her what the genealogy report had found, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is his name in the complaint Ruth Ann filed?" Reardon said yes. Gloria said, "She tried to tell someone. She tried to do exactly what you're supposed to do." He said, "I know." He called Marcus Morales next. Marcus was at his desk at work. He stepped outside. When Reardon told him, Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside his office and didn't speak for a long time. Then he said he was at her door every day. Reardon said he knew. Marcus said she probably smiled at him. Derek Shields had spent 29 years in the unremarkable passage of ordinary life. He had worked in warehouse logistics in Indianapolis and Cincinnati after leaving the Postal Service in 1999. He had remarried in 2003. He kept his yard tidy and watched football, and had no civic reputation to speak of, no awards and frames, no community role that would now need to revise its understanding of itself. His trust had never been that kind of trust. He had not earned it through years of demonstrated character. It had been ambient, living in the uniform, the federal employment, the daily presence at the door. He had been part of the routine of Arlington Avenue, the way the sidewalk is part of a route. You don't evaluate the sidewalk. You walk on it. He had known Ruth Ann Morales' schedule the way a carrier knows schedules, not because she had told him, but because the route told him. When she was home, when she wasn't, when her children came down the street from school, when packages arrived. He had developed, over 6 years, an intimacy with the outward texture of her life that she had not consented to, and that he had converted, at some point, into something she was right to fear. She had feared it. She had documented it. She had handed the documentation to an institution she trusted to act on it. The DINA warrant for Derek Shields was approved by a Hamilton County, Ohio, Common Pleas judge on June 5, 2023, and executed 4 days later. Shields provided the sample without statement and requested his attorney. The laboratory confirmed the match in 7 days. Investigators then cross-referenced the Postal Service substitute carrier logs with Shields' movements after his transfer. He had covered the Arlington Avenue route legally on 2 days in August 1995 and once in September. Patricia Flynn's mail truck sighting from the afternoon of October 3rd, the day before the murder, placed a postal vehicle on the block at 4:45 p.m. on a day when the route's assigned substitute had completed and returned her shift well before 4. The presence of that truck remained unexplained by official records. Edna Garza, now 94 and assisted living in Fort Wayne, was interviewed by phone in June 2023. She confirmed that she had known the regular carrier by his first name, that she had offered him water on summer afternoons many times. She was quiet for a moment after Reardon told her what the investigation had found. Then she said, "I spoke to him 40 times if I spoke to him once." She said it plainly, not as accusation of herself, as information. The plainest possible statement of what the trust had been. Derek Shields was arrested at his Cincinnati home on July 11, 2023. He said nothing. His wife stood in the hallway and said his name once. He did not look at her. She told investigators afterward that in that moment she understood that the person she had known for 20 years was not the whole person. She did not know what the rest of him contained. That, she said, was what she would have to carry forward. Shields was extradited to Indiana, charged with murder in the first degree, and entered a not guilty plea. In November 2023, he changed his plea to guilty. He was sentenced to 55 years in January 2024. He made no statement. Marcus Morales was 43 years old on the day Derek Shields was sentenced. He had been 14 the afternoon he came home and found his mother, and had called 911, and had stayed on the line for 11 minutes. He had grown up with that phone call the way some people grow up with a physical scar, not visible from the outside, present all the time. He stood at the podium in the Allen County Courthouse and spoke for 10 minutes. He said that his mother had been saving money toward a larger apartment, one where she and her children would each have a room of their own, and that she had calculated she was 11 months away from having enough for the deposit. He described the budget ledger, the colored ink, the green column, the last entry from the morning of October 4th. He said the ledger had been on the kitchen table when he came home from school, and that it was still there when the police arrived, and that he had carried that image with him for 29 years, and that he now had the ledger in his house in Indianapolis. He said his mother had tried to tell someone that she had written a complaint, 3 pages, dated and signed, specific and clear in the way she was specific and clear about everything she put in writing, and had handed it to the right institution, and that the institution had moved the problem sideways and called it resolved, and that she had died 2 months later. He said he did not want the court to interpret his saying this as bitterness at any individual. He said he wanted it on record that a system had failed his mother, and that the system's failure had a specific and correctable shape, and that he intended to spend the rest of his career making sure the correction happened. There is a photograph of Ruth Ann Morales taken on the front porch of the Arlington Avenue house in the summer of 1994, the year before she was killed. She is in a lawn chair with a book, one sandal half off, the budget ledger on the porch railing at her elbow. She looks like someone who has a full afternoon and knows exactly how she is going to spend it. In the spring of 2025, the Indiana legislature passed the Ruth Ann Morales Workplace Safety Reporting Act, requiring employers to transmit records of documented harassment or threatening behavior complaints involving employees to the local law enforcement agency within 72 hours when the subject of that complaint is subsequently harmed. The United States Postal Service separately revised its carrier complaint protocols, requiring that all complaints describing pattern-threatening behavior be referred to the postmaster's law enforcement liaison within 30 days of filing. If either of those requirements had existed in July 1995, Derek Shields' name would have been in the Fort Wayne Police Department's active investigation within the first week after Ruth Ann was killed. The budget ledger is in Marcus's house in Indianapolis. It was in Gloria's box for 28 years, unopened, and she gave it to him after the sentencing. He has read every entry. The green column was growing. His mother had been 11 months from the deposit. She had written, in the final entry, a note to herself in the margin, on schedule. Think about what kind of trusting the mailman actually is. It is not trust built through relationship or accumulated experience or chosen faith. It is trust by institution, the trust we extend to a uniform, a federal employer, a daily routine so embedded in ordinary life that we have stopped examining it. Derek Shields did not earn that trust. He inherited it the day he put on the uniform. And when Ruth Ann Morales felt that something was wrong, when she put her fear into writing and handed it to someone who could act, she was right. She was right about everything. The system that received her complaint understood she was right, because it moved him. It just didn't move far enough, or tell anyone who needed to know. What should the obligation of an employer be when a complaint is concerning enough to act on, but not, apparently, concerning enough to report? And what do you think of Edna Garza's answer? I spoke to him 40 times if I spoke to him once, as a description of what ambient trust looks like from the inside. Justice found Ruth Ann Morales after 29 years. Stories like hers are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe. More cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for being here.